Thanks for tuning into the Brave OT podcast. This episode is part of a conversation, a full conversation I had with Jen Anderson Frost. She's an OT in the UK. And we had a 4.5 conversation, as seems to happen when I interview other neurodivergent OTs. It makes sense. We get really passionate and excited. This episode is not that long, though. This episode's closer to 40 minutes, give or take an intro or an outro. And it focuses more on the ACT parts of their journey. So, acceptance and commitment therapy is something that I'm really passionate about, and Jen's really passionate about as well. So, it's an intersection that I think a lot of OTs will have interest in from that clinical perspective. Jen certainly brings their lived experience to the whole conversation, though I have not included the full lived experience in this episode. It's going to come in an episode down the road. I decided to separate it out so I could have something that's a little bit more concise for those who are interested in the ACT part of things, and something that's more fulsome for those who want to hear the lived experience in its detail. For some people, that might be something they don't want to hear. There's some trauma in there. There's some really difficult things that are part of their story. And I think that it will be valuable for anyone who is open to listening to it. So we're going to talk about acceptance and commitment therapy in the context of both of our practices, in the context of her practice. And I'm just going to read her words that she wrote to me in describing their services. So for this context, she says, I'm new to providing services that support queer and or neurodivergent parents with perinatal mental health and burnout, alongside my associate work as a pediatric OT supporting children and families. In my new role, I draw on both my professional background and my lived experience as a queer, neurodivergent, bio and non-bio mom and perinatal OCD survivor. So let's get into the episode. I think you'll learn a lot. And I'm going to invite you at the end of the episode, toward the end, I don't know, maybe it's about 3/4 of the way through, to consider my Practical ACT for OTs course. It's open for registration at the time that I'll be posting this episode, January 28th. 2026. We are currently actively in the last few days of accepting registration for our February start cohort of the Practical ACT for OTs course, open to OTs around the world. And I will tell you a little bit more about that later in the episode. I just wanted you to know that's coming. And if you're listening to this later, maybe check the website anyways and see. We might be open again. You're listening to the Brave OT podcast with me, Carlin Neek. This podcast is all about empowering occupational therapists to step up, level up, blaze some trails, and maybe engage in a little conscious rebellion in service of our profession, our clients, our work, our businesses, and living our mission wholeheartedly. We are all about keeping it real, doing hard things, unhustling, being curious, exploring, growing through our challenges, and finding joy, fulfillment, and vitality as we do so. Really, we're OTing ourselves and each other. I hope you love this episode. Jen, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I was really honored when you reached out to talk about this possibility.
Thank you for having me. I feel, honored to be here. I know I came across you, God, it must have been over a year now that I was doing the ACT OT thing with you. You've been talked about a lot. So to actually be here on your podcast is really special.
What? People are talking about me? That feels weird.
Yeah, you don't hear of many occupational therapists that are using ACT in their practice. And not just that, but openly talking about it and then also educating others about using it in their practice. That's special that you're doing that. And so many people want to get amongst ACT now. Like I'm meeting so many OTs that are interested in ways of working. And I think ACT just seems to, I know we've talked about it before, it just fits. Yeah.
It fits. Yeah, it fits so nicely. But it does help to learn from an OT who understands our context and can put it in that framework. Before we get too far, can you tell the listeners a little bit about you, where you are, what you like to do?
So I'm Jen. I go by she, they pronouns. I'm an occupational therapist licensed in the UK. So I also use the title coach. I interchangeably use intuitive living coach or nervous system coach, depending on who I'm speaking to and their understanding. I've just got into private practice, so fairly newly settling into private practice alongside some associate work that I'm doing just while I build my business, build my confidence, and yeah, just get used to all that is involved in building private practice. As you would know, you've done it yourself, and there's so
Yeah,
much to think about, isn't there?
there is. And we don't have to do it all at once.
So initially, it was all about supporting children, specifically neurodivergent children and their families. And then, whilst I was planning, I guess, the foundations of my private practice, I thought just on the side, I'm going to do a podcast on perinatal mental health. I'm going to call it Intuitive Living, but the first series is going to be about perinatal mental health. And it's going to be about my experience, but also the other parents that I met through when I was unwell. So I had perinatal OCD 3 years ago. I would have only been 2 years into my recovery when I started thinking about OT intuition. So it was very much still at the forefront of, I was still recovering. I would still say I'm recovering, but
Sure.
in a place where I can help others now. Yeah, so that was something that I just started doing, not thinking like that was going to be the way I went. Didn't think I'll go all in with perinatal mental health.
But there you were sharing some
But
passion and lived experience. You were learning, you're living it, you're
yeah,
adapting. It made sense. That's something you want to share.
yeah, absolutely. I thought because I'm just so passionate about my experience, which I can go into, yeah, the whole being on the other side of it as a patient, because I've worked in mental health before as well. My background is pediatric. So, yeah, children and families, but I've also worked with adults in inpatient units. I've seen that side of mental health from a professional point of view. And yeah, so just doing the podcasts and talking to some of my friends that I'd made through OCD Action, just really, it just brought up a lot in me. It just made me question, like, this feels really natural to be doing. Of course, I've got this lived experience and passion to help others. I wouldn't say that my experience in terms of the support I got from professionals was awful, but there was certainly a fair few experiences where I thought there could be a lot more education around what parents are experiencing with. So for me, it was intrusive thoughts. So yeah, in doing the podcast and my friends sharing their experiences, I actually felt that I was quite fortunate with my experience because for one, I was seen by the perinatal mental health team. Others that I was speaking to weren't able to get onto, they were on a very long waiting list or not even able to get onto it because the threshold for the criteria was just so high. And they were really poorly. But I think the thing with perinatal OCD is that there's so much shame and guilt tied into it that you wouldn't necessarily come across as unwell as you actually are. It's just so much that comes into it. Like, why can I not have the same help that I would tell others to go and get? But I wasn't thinking about that. I was just in such a state of fear and, yeah, dignity. My friend, who's a really experienced social worker, was saying, "You are the person that needs this help right now. You really need it. And will you accept it?" And I was just like, "Yeah, okay, yeah, so I'll think about it." But I was just not really there. I was just on autopilot and
Yeah.
hearing people saying what they wanted to hear.
Was there a moment of a breakthrough moment where you realized, oh, wait, like where that flipped for you?
Yeah. So my health visitor, I finally said I would let them refer me to the perinatal mental health team.
Okay.
I think what helped was I spoke to a psychiatrist and they said the word ego-dystonic when I was talking about the intrusive thoughts I was having. And of course, trying to get reassurance from them. But what if I do this? And what will that mean? And blah, blah, blah.
And define ego-dystonic for those who are listening who don't know
And
that.
yeah, so she used the word ego-dystonic, and I said, "What does that mean? What does
Yeah.
ego-dystonic mean?" And she said, "It is separate from your true self, so your values, your morals. It is the complete opposite to what you want to do. And that's why you're having that thought. So it's basically OCD is taken what is the most meaningful thing to you, your children, and it's and OCD is just so messed up. It will throw at you the thing that will
Sure.
scare you the most, and that would be because initially it was harm. It was thoughts about other people harming them, but then it was, oh, but what if it's you? And then my mind was just like, wow, yeah, thanks for that. What if
Yeah.
it's me? There's nothing
Way
I
to ratchet that one up a few notches,
yeah,
right?
and
Yeah.
that is
Thanks,
like
mind.
literally OCD is like this little gremlin that's just, I'm gonna throw this in there then. But once you like
That's bad. Here's a
yeah.
yeah.
And you do so yeah, that really helped. And I become more accepting of I think she said something like, oh, and I also she was quite open, but obviously keeping confidentiality, but said, oh, and I spoke to another mum that is a professional in this area today, and they didn't want to do this with their child because they had similar thoughts to what you're having. And then she said, I would say I hear these intrusive thoughts daily from different parents. So she was
And
like,
there's so much non-judgment in that. First, the label is non-judgment because it actually fully acknowledges that these thoughts are not you, right? That
yeah,
they actually are, you are the opposite of these
yeah,
thoughts, which in that way I could imagine really takes your defenses down and makes
yeah,
you feel that, right, this professional isn't judging me. They actually see me for who I am. And
yeah, they were amazing.
that's so good. And then
I know.
also that validation of, yeah, like there are other professionals. Like this isn't the thing that just happens to lay people who don't know better or something like that, right?
No, and I think, excuse me, I think when you're so in it, I know like with OCD, you're not supposed to have reassurance, you can't engage in compulsions, there's all these different things. But I do think when you are initially just so unwell, and I would say, and I don't use it lightly, but I would say I was nearing thoughts of no longer wanting. I had thoughts of no longer wanting to be here, but I wasn't planning anything as of yet. But certainly had, yeah, very, very dark thoughts and feelings. So I think when you add that,
Yeah.
the professional needs to, they need to reassure you. You need that safety
Yeah.
just to get to that stage of then you can then try and work on the other things, the real therapy, the gold standard stuff. But initially, you just need someone to say, "I understand you, and you're safe, and it's going to be okay." And I just really needed that, and she did that. And yeah, she was amazing. And then I was accepting of the mental health nurse coming.
Yeah, I just pause there for a second on that
Yes.
piece of you are safe. I think is so key in your own experience of
Yeah.
how in that moment your doctor said what indicators she gave you that you're safe. I know we encounter
Okay.
all the time people who share thoughts of not wanting to be alive, and we're often trying to differentiate between thoughts and actions. But I'm curious
Yeah.
in that moment, what was the indicator?
So what she said made me think, "Oh, I'm safe," was, yeah, that the word ego-dystonic, once she explained what that meant, it really just, yeah, took so much weight off the it made me realize that what I'm thinking is not real and doesn't I'm it when you learn about acceptance and commitment therapy, for example, it will talk about things like entanglement. So I was deep in entanglement with the thoughts that I was having. I was holding them as factual and making them a part of who I was. So overly relating to them and identifying with the
Over
thought.
identifying, very hooked, very connected.
Very
These thoughts
hooked.
are me, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Where
like, I said I remember saying, "I've lost myself. I don't know where Jenna is anymore." And then she was just like, "You're still here." That is ego-dystonic thoughts, and basically, you're in that story right now, but there's this other story, and that is who you've always been. And she just the way she spoke was just so, like, beautiful, and I just needed it. So it was just I was like, yes, no, you're right. I am Jenna, and I know that there's other things that have always been of value to me, and they still are. Children are of great value to me, and that is why this is so distressing and so debilitating because. Yeah, because I was struggling to separate the story from myself, and she did that It was like she got a knife and just obviously not completely, there was still so much work to do, but that was just an initial, like, hug to the part of myself that I couldn't reach. She was able to reach the real me whilst I was so unwell.
Initiated that distancing process. Like in ACT, where we're trying to
Yeah,
create space between you and who you are and the thoughts that are a little bit like the weather,
diffusion.
right? Yeah.
Yeah,
That they're transient, they change, but ultimately you come down to who you are, who you always have been, what your values are, and how
yeah,
much power you have to choose your actions, even in the presence
yeah,
of this crazy weather that's going on, these thoughts, these feelings, right?
yeah, exactly, yeah.
And it sounds like in that moment, that doctor really initiated that process for you with some nice authority, giving you a fancy word for it even. There's a term for this, ego-dystonic. Like that would be quite compelling.
Yeah, yeah. The conversation went really well, but there was one bit, of course, there always is, that my
Sure.
mind did hook onto, and that was just be careful of the word of ego-dystonic, because that in itself can be used as like a compulsion. So it may be that then every time I had and I did find myself doing this, but then say, no, that's a compulsion. But every time I had a dark thought, I would say, ego-dystonic, doesn't matter, it's ego-dystonic. And then you're not really dealing with it
Yeah, yeah.
because you're
Whisk it away. I don't, yeah.
yeah, it's like it's still avoidance, isn't it?
Mhm.
Avoidance of what is going on rather than just letting it be. It's like you're batting it away with ego-dystonic. So it's
Mm,
still gonna then come to the
I hear that.
surface.
I hear
Yeah, it's
that.
gonna come back. Yeah. So although that I clung on to that and that made me quite anxious, that something that she had just said that felt so powerful and useful, I then actually couldn't really use too much because that was going to be a compulsion.
To frame
Scary.
that. Yes, absolutely. And to frame that for the listeners who haven't trained in ACT,
Yeah,
I think it's really important to highlight that when we're using acceptance and commitment therapy, the goal is for us to respond more flexibly to difficult thoughts and feelings and inner experiences or situations, that sort of thing. And very often the enemy is avoidance, right? So experiential
yeah,
avoidance. We're often so much of what we do is to keep ourselves in our bubble, keep ourselves feeling safe and comfortable and that sort of thing, and go outside of that and we get uncomfortable because that's life, right? And so avoidance is like we really work with people to go, okay, here's an uncomfortable feeling, let's be with that, let's experience it, let's not try to do something to get rid of it. Let's just go, okay, I can have this hard feeling, I can make room for it, I can experience it, I can describe it, instead of, oh, I can't, I need to feel better, let's get out of the situation, let's do all
yeah,
the deep breathing, like those things. Not to say that we stop doing things that make ourselves feel better, but we really build that capacity to be present and aware and connected with difficult thoughts, feelings, experiences, and still choose our actions with intention. And
yeah,
that's so when you highlight that avoidance bit, it's a really good key thing where, oh yeah, I could easily just swipe that off the board because I've labeled it. Away it goes.
yeah.
Well, no, sometimes I need to be a bit present with whatever the content was so that I can go, it doesn't actually, I can see it it still doesn't have power over me.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess I want to get across how this is all internal. So a lot of
Yeah.
people think about OCD as outwardly engaging in compulsions like cleaning and not wanting to touch things that are contaminated. So contamination OCD is the most common probably form of OCD that you'll hear talked about, or being really organized and yeah, not liking things out of place. Whereas this is a lot of people refer to it as pure OCD, but I'm not sure if that is widely used, but I've heard it. And there was a series called Puro. But yeah, it's basically this is all going on internally. It's you're fighting with the thoughts within your mind. So the compulsions are like rumination. So not even just arguing with the thought itself, but it may be that you're literally just sat there going through your whole life trying to find evidence that either proves you guilty or not guilty of whatever the thought is. And within that, your mind can even make up scenarios that didn't actually happen because you're
Mm,
just so unwell.
yeah.
And then it just, yeah, just it's just a vicious circle if you don't get a therapist that knows what they're doing.
So that's what you did.
I did. I was just so unwell. So yeah, whilst the medication was doing its thing, I was just, worse. And I was compulsively reading books as well. I've got two of them. Two of them here. Just spent so much time. Can you see them? Because I've got the blur on.
Yeah.
I've got
OCD.
Overcoming Unwanted Intrusive Thoughts. So it's a CBT based guide to getting over frightening, obsessive, or disturbing thoughts. And that one's actually quite good. It doesn't say that it uses ACT, but I would say that it's definitely using ACT in that book. And then this was the one that was recommended by the NHS is Break Free from OCD.
Okay.
So that in England is recommended by the National Health Service. So I was reading them like front to back numerous times and listening to podcasts and all sorts.
Do you know
Um,
what both of those, what puts me off about both of those titles is
yeah,
moving on, right?
yeah,
And breaking free. And
yeah,
these might be things that one needs to keep living with, right? Like that
yeah,
essentially, let's wipe it out. Here's the book that will eliminate the thing and you'll be
yeah.
free. And I get like how naming things like that's marketing, but oh
Oh,
man,
yeah.
how about coping with or managing through? Those aren't as catchy titles.
I think there's a lot of money making because people who are really unwell with OCD are so vulnerable. I think even if they didn't have the money, they would pay for what if someone's saying they'll make them better, they're probably, the most vulnerable type of person, one of the most vulnerable you could get. But doing that, my mental health nurse was advising that I only maybe have an hour a day where I just read stuff, factual, scientific stuff that, isn't going to make things worse. And if there's anything I read that I'm unsure of, to talk to them about it rather than spiraling or whatever. But yeah, that was still seen as a compulsion. So I gradually had to stop reading about stuff for a period of time so that it was more of a healthy education, like trying to educate myself rather than trying to find answers to get better. So I had to see it in a different way. But yeah, I had the mental health nurse coming to see me. I had an occupational therapist come to see me, but it's just such an awkward thing to to be receiving treatment for. And I guess that continued for a long time, the feeling of awkwardness and being accepting 1 minute and then maybe putting my guard up again and being like, but I'm a professional, I work with children, so this is ridiculous. So I can't have this theme. It just needs to I start I almost get angry, like it just needs to yeah, like just go away now. Like I know who I am. But then the more angry I got, the more it would come back with a vengeance. And just so I did go up and down with getting better, getting poorly again. But yeah, eventually he did some exposure. Like I had to imagine things and some of it was really uncomfortable. Had to imagine like my worst fears, sometimes whilst looking at pictures of people I love. So it was really hard stuff. Had to do things like say my thoughts in a silly voice, record myself completing, they call it like a loop. So it's like you're recording maybe like a playful story that you're creating about these really messed up thoughts that feel scary to say out loud and record and then have on your phone, which of course you're then like, what if someone steals my phone and all this other stuff? Um, so yeah, the recovery was really hard. I had to do some really hard things. And I think it wasn't really considered that like I'm neurodivergent as well and have like certain sensory sensitivities. And I think it was really traumatizing as well. I think it helped, but also it was quite traumatizing to think back to some of the visualizations and that we did is quite I found it really hard, and it makes me feel a lump in my throat now just thinking about it because it was too much for my nervous system to
Yeah.
experience,
Do you know
especially like remotely.
Yes, absolutely. And what's interesting too, I've done a lot of exposure therapy with clients in vivo, like out, and very often clients off work and can't go near their workplace. Usually that's a hospital. And we're
Yeah.
doing this gradual exposure. And even though I love ACT, as you know, it's my thing, everything I do is ACT. I actually use the CBT version of exposure therapy, not the ACT version, because
Okay.
I don't want to jump too far. I've I've had so much success with, okay, let's make this uncomfortable but not unbearable, and
Yeah.
keep doing that until that's less uncomfortable, and then we can step it up a little bit, but really trying to work in those middle levels of discomfort and master them before progressing, and give the client a sense of, we're not going to go too far too quick because we have to go through these steps. Whereas
Yeah.
the ACT exposure is a lot of, hey, let's just go do it and show you that it's okay. Like, prove to your nervous system that we just went into this really uncomfortable place and you're still here. And I appreciate the intention of it. And oversimplification, like anyone who's listening who knows more about those things, there are different layers, but I tend to avoid that because it sensitizes, right? I don't want to essentially re-traumatize a person by putting them fully into the situation. I want a more controlled build of confidence that's gradual, that's a little bit like we approach breaking down most of our occupations into the smaller components.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it really is, it's like the bottom up, top down approach, like thinking about working with your client's nervous system before going into all the other stuff, the psychological aspect. I mentioned to you about inference CBT, so ICBT, and I've been learning a bit about that. And I am wondering if it sounds like they both do different things, ACT and ICBT, like they almost complement each other. I don't feel confident enough to fully summarize the difference between the two at the moment. But from ICBT, it seems more sensory focused. So
Okay.
it's really about, it's very neurodivergent affirming and it's OCD specific in terms of treatment. So yeah, it's looking at that person's sensory needs and making sure that they're feeling safe within their nervous system before going on to the other things.
Right.
And it also views thoughts in a different way. But yeah, that could be a whole nother podcast. But that
Yeah.
I really recommend looking into that. I'm still, yeah, really interested in learning more about it. But it sounds
Cool.
really good. But yeah, for me, I didn't get the ICBT. I wish I did. But I found out about ACT on my own, actually, through the obsessive research that I was doing, multiple podcasts. I did write a few of them down. So one of the people I really loved was Kimberly Quinlan. I don't know if
Mhm.
you've heard of them. They've got Your Anxiety Toolbox
Mhm.
podcast, and they're a therapist and anxiety specialist, and they experienced, I think it was relational OCD, so intrusive thoughts about, I think it was like being unfaithful to their partner, and there's so many different things you can get. It blew my mind once I started learning more about OCD. But yeah, she had some really amazing podcasts on like radical self-compassion and mindfulness combined with things like ACT and yeah, working with intrusive thoughts basically. And she also had some like guided meditation talks that
Mhm.
I was listening to in the bath, and I just remember feeling like, yeah, there's another way of doing my treatment. And I think I need to take this on and do
Mhm.
things my own way a little bit. It's not to say the help I had through the perinatal team wasn't helpful, because it really was. But
Mhm.
definitely the other, yeah, the people that I found through my own research were really beneficial to my recovery as well. There's also OCD Stories, which is a podcast. And I remember hearing some people talk about themes very similar, if not the same as mine. So
Mhm.
that was really, yeah, it just made me feel validated and human to know that other people are going through this too. And funnily, quite a lot of them were professionals. So I think because you have that added, it's that you hold yourself on a high pedestal, don't you? You're like, I am the expert here, so I
Really, I'm
can't.
immune and should not be having these problems.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the one who helps people. How is this happening to me? But actually, it's really common to happen to professionals, and a lot of them are really highly, intelligent, but
Mhm.
yeah, just doing really well and experiencing similar things, if not the same as what I did. Quite a lot of therapists that I found are actually survivors like myself. So they've experienced it, they know how horrible it is. They haven't had the right treatment. So they've then felt empowered, and I guess you feel like it's something I can't think of the right word, but you feel like I must be the person to advocate for this area because it's underserved and not enough people know about it and talk about it out of fear and shame. So it's
And is
taken
that the loop back to the start of the story where you started your private practice, not working in perinatal mental health specifically, but you did this
yeah,
podcast as a passion project because of your lived experience?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Else
And
out there.
that's what's so special about it. And I guess for me too, receiving these messages is like I've even had other people that other professionals, and some of them have even been OTs saying I experienced that theme and I really worried about it for the same reasons you did because I work with children or vulnerable people, whatever it may be. So they're like, thank you for being brave and speaking out.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's you're not it's not a bad thing. That is the whole point of ACT, is knowing that, okay, the thoughts were scary. I always think about people who write horror movies. Like, how messed up have their thoughts got to be to write these films, produce these films? So if you think about it like that, really helps me to think, God, yeah, like my OCD was almost just, it was a horror movie on replay and I couldn't turn it off. I didn't like the film, but it's there. It might still pop up now, and that's okay. It's just, yeah, it's thoughts. Everybody has them. There's also this article that one of the therapists shared with me. It was a study done years ago on some students, university students, and it was asking them to say what intrusive thoughts they had.
Mm.
And it was really I'll have to share it with you. It's really interesting they're saying what dark thoughts they had, and it was like 90 odd percent of people have these thoughts, these really taboo, intrusive thoughts, but they just react to them differently. So that's the difference with OCD. Is someone else will have a really dark thought and think, "Ugh, that was weird. Anyway, what was I doing?" Whereas OCD, you're like, that meant something about me. What does this mean? I must get an answer. And then you just spiral and it gets worse. And that is the difference of I don't like to say healthy and unhealthy mind. A mind that is able to process thoughts in a neutral way, as opposed to someone
Yeah.
who's,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's more
entangled.
disruptive for maybe. And yeah, in their
Yeah.
lives. Yeah. Yeah. That makes a
Yeah,
lot of sense.
absolutely.
Wow.
I feel like there's so much I could just go on and on because obviously it was just such a journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, using it
Really.
for goodness now.
In this episode, we've talked about acceptance and commitment therapy, and I have a course that I teach called the Practical Act for OTs course that I deliver online. I launch it a couple of times a year, but if you're listening right now I'm accepting enrollments into the Practical Act for OTs course, and it's a nice short, I give you 4 months of support, but the actual content is only about 4.5 hours worth of recorded content that you have no limit to the time that you get it. I provide a library full of resources that I keep adding to. And in those 4 months that a person might sign up, I've got some live calls that people can come so we can talk about, hey, how is this OT? How does this work in my setting? How is this? Here's the thing I'm a bit uncertain about. How do I apply this? So I really enjoy being able to have those conversations. It's optional. You don't have to come to those parts. And I also have an online forum. It used to be on Facebook. Now it's in another platform where people can ask questions or share resources in an asynchronous way. So I really appreciate the way we've been able to bring ACT to life in this conversation. And you took my course. Is
I
there anything you might share with our listeners about your experience in taking my course?
Yeah, I know, absolutely. I loved it. I was just really, I just literally wanted to shout yay when I saw it. I just was so pleased to come across it because,
You already loved ACT.
oh, yeah, I loved ACT. And then I thought, an OT and ACT, like this is a winner. So of course I need to do this. And yeah, no questions asked, I was just signed up. So yeah, I was sold. But no, it was brilliant because I was questioning, like, do I need an alternative qualification or to take extra study, which I had done a couple courses, but you just gave me the confidence in the training to know that actually as occupational therapists, we already have so many skills that make us very strongly capable of providing this to people in a way that supports them to understand what meaningful occupation is. I think the folder of resources that you had as well, I still refer to them now. There's so many,
There are rabbit holes in there too that
yeah,
open you up into other labyrinths of more
yeah.
yeah.
No, it really is. It's so useful because I may have a period of time where when I was working for the NHS where I'm not using it. And then it's just nice to have that big folder of resources to just go through now and again,
Yeah.
even for yourself, to just remind you of useful ways of thinking if you're getting difficult thoughts right now, worry, anxiety, stress. It helps with so many things. So yeah, that resource folder is forever going to be part of my life, I think.
That's and I appreciate there's something really important that you just highlighted in there because ACT is an approach that we can use and actually has no certification process by design. So the people who made ACT have very intentionally made it accessible. You can use it a little bit, you can use it a lot. You don't have to be a certain profession. There is no certification for ACT. And I like that about it. And often we are pursuing more certifications so we can feel a little bit more confident in going there. And so that can be uncertain for some people. And so it's something it's the main mission of the course is to show you that you can do this. And it doesn't have to be psychotherapy. Like one could, OTs can pursue different in different countries and different regions, how that's defined. But this doesn't have to be you seeming like a psychologist. This can be you in your role as an OT, supporting people in engaging in occupations and ACT as a tool in the toolbox to support facilitating occupations, overcoming some of those barriers that are more internal to engaging in those occupations. And so I really appreciated that you highlighted that this gave you the confidence to just go out and start using it.
It did, yeah. And I feel like it's so easy to just I use it all the time. I don't feel like it's just in my toolbox. I actually feel like I'm using it all the time.
It's a lens through which I see the world now. I can't
exactly it.
I know.
Once you know ACT, there's no going back. Yeah, it really is. It's magical in the way that ACT was, so much more helpful in my recovery in comparison to CBT. So funny, I was going through a folder earlier and I found a load of my paperwork from when I had my first episode of OCD. So it was before my perinatal episode.
Yeah.
And it was really sad reading some of what I'd written because it's so neurodivergent. Can I say that? It is like so much of it is just screams neurodivergence, and none of the support I got was aimed at someone who's neurodivergent. So
are you saying that this CBT approach was less of a fit for you because you're neurodivergent, or was it more how it was delivered?
I think both. I think because the language use, and I think the way in that it asks you to question your thoughts is very, because I guess I'm quite literal thinking at times, and I guess I found it quite confusing, the language. So it was like situation trigger. What were your feelings? Unhelpful thoughts and images. And then it's facts that support, so evidence that supports that thought and evidence against that thought. And then alternative, more realistic and balanced perspectives and outcome, and then asking me to rate my emotion. But I know I got really stuck on the evidence for, and I know I just got down. I was in a bit of a rabbit hole with that then because I was just ruminating, okay, what are all the facts that prove that I am this? And I spent so much time on that one area of the whole
fed the OCD. Yeah.
It did. And I remember thinking, this isn't working, but I can't tell them because I don't want to tell them the thoughts I'm having.
I've tried to use those sheets too, and I've not liked them because it's okay, great. I can rewrite a nicer version. Is that what you're looking for? Are you looking for a more positive version? Great. What did we achieve here? I have all of these thoughts and they are so disruptive. I wrote a pretty sentence. That's often how I felt too. And it could be my neurodivergent literal thinking too, but it felt yuck. Yeah.
I mean, there's loads of it. There's, thought challenging, and just there's so much here that I'm just like, this can do so much damage if
Yeah.
you don't know that the person has actually got OCD and not just your standard worry. I do a worry jar or anxiety.
How would you say ACT is different from in that example? How does ACT differ for those who don't know?
I wouldn't even be getting caught up in the thought and the story of the thought, giving it this much time. I think this is allowing you to just sit there and give all of your attention to the thought and it is actively inviting you to ruminate over it. So
Yes.
you're then engaging in compulsions and reinforcing the compulsions, and it's going to make you feel better, but then it's going to get worse again because you're not dealing with the fact. And it sounds harsh. I remember first thinking ACT is harsh because it's accept the thought, just carry on doing what you want to do, engage in what's valuable and meaningful to you, and just let the thought be there. And I remember initially thinking, I can't just let that thought be there. And I can't say, maybe I am, maybe I'm not like this person, because that feels horrible. But
Because with
eventually,
ACT, we're trying to take the power out of the thought, like kind of create space. There's the thought. Yep.
yeah,
I have those thoughts. Yep. There it is again. I see you. And I can keep eating breakfast and I can keep getting dressed and I can
yeah,
hold my baby or I can go off to the supermarket or the grocery store and oh yeah, there's that thought again. And it
yeah,
sounds so oversimple, but instead of going, ooh, let's figure out the thought, let's figure out the evidence, let's find another thought, let's do a lot with
yeah,
the thought. Instead, we're going to do a lot with our lives and maybe
yeah.
not have the thought worn on our face as it all, right?
Yeah, like this is me. Yeah, no,
Yep.
exactly. It was like I'm gonna do me. I'm gonna carry on being involved in all the things that I'm passionate about, hanging out with the people that I love, and doing the occupations that I
Yeah.
enjoy, and not letting this thought stop me. And it's not about finding alternative thoughts and stories. It's about living the story that your true story that you've always lived before these intrusive thoughts came to life.
Thank you for sharing that and describing and bringing it to life. I really appreciate that very much. And I
No,
appreciate
that's
you being here.
thank you. No, it's been lovely to just talk this out with you. Yeah, I could talk all day. I could literally do
Most definitely.
it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. This was great. I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I enjoyed engaging in the conversation with Jen. I think she brought to life a lot of that nuance and the understanding of experiencing mental health support as somebody who provides mental health support and some of the different ways of approaching things have been experienced through their lived experience and professional experience. I really appreciate the courage in sharing their authentic story. And though I didn't include the full story, that is going to come in another episode, maybe a month or so from now. You can look forward to that somewhere in the early spring. I think it was a really brave thing to share in the way she did. She does so from a grounded and balanced place so that it is something that can be well received from others. If you're interested to learn more about ACT, my Practical ACT for OTs course is open for registration today for the next few days. We are starting a February 1st cohort, 4 months of work together with some support, unlimited access to the recorded learning modules so you can learn flexibly and keep returning back, and unlimited access to the library of resources that I keep adding to. But 4 months is the container for engaging in any of the online community support or coming to the optional calls. I really enjoy sharing ACT with other OTs. And ACT is the thing that's in Activate Vitality, which is my coaching program, and ACT is and the Activate Vitality planner. So I've been loving and living ACT for a long time, and I'm excited to share it because it's so OT. Thanks for listening, and thanks again to Jen for joining us. I'll include links to Jen's resources in the show notes, as well as some of my own. As always, be brave, OTs.